Mac is back in the garage today for some much needed suspension upgrades. I'm always on a quest to improve this car, and today it's going to be on the sway bars in the front. And this may upset a few people, but I made my own sway bars because this car has none currently. Originally, this car would have come with an under the body sway bar because it's actually a 74. This is the so-called through the body sway bar, and the car's already been strengthened and fortified for a stronger sway bar. The ones that are currently available, in my opinion, are too large. What I've designed and contracted to be made is a 17 millimeter bar. I think the smallest you can get from the aftermarket is larger, like 19 or 20 millimeters. They are adjustable, but they're assuming that you have like race suspension. And the type of driving I like to do, this like rally driving and some minor autocross stuff, and the weight of this car, I just feel like that's too much sway bar, too much for the stock suspension. So I may end up upgrading the torsion bars later, but for now, I'm going with a 17 millimeter bar. So early long hood, the short wheelbases, some of them had no sway bars, depending on what trim level. Some of them came with 15 millimeter bars, non-adjustable. Then they went to 17, and then that's kind of where they topped out. And then the underbody sway bars are much bigger, but the leverage ratios are different. So anyways, a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I just made my own. So let me show you what I got. So when I say made my own, I just designed these. This is a 4340 solid bar, and it's a pretty simple device. It's just a straight bar that will twist. This is a similar splined, collar that goes on the end, and then it has a little dish out there so that the bolt that clamps this thing down will lock into that dish and give it a very secure feeling. And then over here, I have some adjustable arms, which have been laser cut, but they haven't been formed, they haven't been welded. So they're ultimately gonna get joined to, these collars, and it's gonna turn into a adjustable arm with some downlinks that are gonna be these nice Aura, ball ends. They're gonna link onto there and go down to the suspension arms, which I'll show you. And then this is the backing plate for the through the body mount. And then this is just a 3D printed prototype to help me hold the bar in place while we kind of develop this and prototype this system. Ultimately, this will get replaced with a stamped sheet metal one. Even the factory one might work, but I'll end up using probably a polyurethane bushing in there. This is the part that clamps to the actual car body. And that's a lot of force for this little bracket. I'm gonna switch, for this sheet metal gauge, we need to go to a bigger die on the bottom. So let me switch the bottom die and then we'll keep bending that. But you can see it's putting a lot of pressure on there. So a lot less tonnage to bend it with this setup. You can see that bend radius on the inside is pretty tight. But anyways, that's what we wanted. And then this plate is gonna get welded on there like that. I don't have the correct dies to do this all in one piece of metal. So I'm just gonna do a corner weld on that one. This has an angle to it. Not like that, like a lot of the stock ones are. This one's going to have a bend to it. And that just makes better geometry when it goes down with the downlink. So I do have a thin shim here that I'm going to utilize to prevent this from being too difficult to assemble. So if we just put the shim in there prior to welding, After welding, when the shim is gone, things will just slip into place. So let's just cinch this down. So I think I can go ahead and weld the entire corner now. Maybe just let it cool down a little bit. I got that entire length done, and I also welded up those little slots, those little windows that I used to mark the bend line. Those are now gone too. So both of these are filled up. Now it's time to weld it onto that collar. It doesn't bind or anything, it's just the perfect fitment. It's just sitting there in the crater, but I can now weld this on there. I got the slot directly opposite of the arm, and I think that's gonna work out well. It's gonna, basically this part of the weld is gonna make this clamp a little stronger, but it's gonna have plenty of room for it to clamp on this top and bottom edge. So I think this will work the best. Plus you'll have good access to get an Allen wrench on that side to clamp it. So I think that's the orientation I want. Now on this one, I'm just gonna tack it, because if I guessed wrong on this angle, then this part here is a pretty cheap part. This is a pretty expensive one up top. So if anything, I can throw this away, but salvage this piece if I just tack it for now. That is not coming off. One, because the bolt interferes with the bar. There's that little moon cut out of it, so that cannot slip off. See how it's loose? It wiggles, but it cannot come off the bar itself. So that's kind of a safety feature. When you clamp that down, it no longer wiggles. So that is a really nice connection right there. Okay, so I just cleaned off some of the rally grime, still a little wet, but cars clean up just fine. Everything here is looking good. So this is what I was gonna show you. This is the reinforced sway bar area. So there is a plate that's about the size of my hand that is reinforced to the internal box structure. So there is a bulkhead right here. And so this plate kind of ties into where that bulkhead begins. It also ties down here to this sharp edge that is a little bit stronger. And then, you know, it just kind of disperses that load over a wider area. Plus it's double thick and welded on the inside. So seam welded there. So this is an improvement for anything that's an aftermarket sway bar. It will not tear or rip out. I've also reinforced the rear of the car. I'm just gonna tape the far end of this bar because this passes right behind the gas tank, which is nicely painted in this car. So we don't want to try to scratch anything. Yep, so that hole is big enough in the car. Now the nut plate needs to go right behind there. So I'm gonna try to get that started. This is gonna be a little tricky to get this guy located on the back with the gas tank in place. So this guy needs to go behind what I just showed you. It needs to go behind. So this is the trunk area, and it needs to go kind of in this gap. It needs to go in there. It's going to be tricky to get that in there. It goes this way. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a fish wire through, like a piece of welding wire, and I'm just going to try to clothesline this up to the back side. So see how I was able to bring that up close with just that pull wire? So now I should be able to get at least one of the bolts in, and that'll keep it secure. And now I'm just going to push this pull wire, I'm just going to push that through the inside. And then that's what the end looked like, so I was able to just, pull it. So now this should pass through all the way to the other side. That tape worked out nice because the bunches of the tape, I was able to go in on the far side and just pull that tape to line these up. Otherwise, you're just aiming for a blind hole. But we got it on. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in, which, it's not permanent. But I'm going to do one bolt at a time so I don't lose that plate on the backside. So that's looking good. So these holes are pretty much directly above the arm, which is down here. So see, this is the stock sway bar location, the mount location. So there's a rubber bushing in there right now. So from here goes directly up to here, the downlink. So let's cut this thing off so we can put in a new mount that is easier to attach a downlink. This is for a underbody sway bar that goes directly, under the body. It comes through here and it pivots on some bolts back here, but we're not using that. We're using this one, which is the advantage of this one is it's adjustable. So we got 4 locations down here, and I might put 2 locations down here. I really should have done this when I put these bushings in, but whatever. I made 2 cuts on this guy. So this is a hoop. I made a cut this way and I made a cut this way. And then I wedged this pry tool in between and kind of split it open. So now I just have to grind down these 2 welds and release these 2 pieces, and we should have a nice flat surface to weld a new bracket onto. I'm switching to air tools now because it's far more compact in this tight space. That is successfully removed with love, so we can put a new bracket on there. So it's back to the press brake for this little bracket. 2 bends here. Just got some pilot holes for the through bolts. So if I'm off a little bit on the bend, I may have to adjust the holes. So I'll open them up after I bend it. And then see what I mean about the brake tooling running into the part. So I'm only able to bend it that far. We'll have to bend the rest by hand.
Over bent it a little bit, but that's okay because it's easier to open it up than to keep bending it. So we pretty much hit those, laser marks on the inside of these. It might need to be adjusted just a tiny bit. So there's the M8 bolt, pretty level. Let's try this one. Yep, that's good enough. All right, so there's my bracket, and I'm just clamping it here, and I'm positioning it so it's perpendicular to this bar here, because that's how it rotates. So I think that's pretty much it. Maybe tweak it a tiny bit like that. So I now have a nut welded on to just a piece of tubing. This is the downlink, and it's intersecting here with the bottom, although it's really probably too long. I'm gonna use this tubing to go down inside this bracket here, and it'll get a polyurethane or rubber bushing. I guess I'm gonna put the car down and try to establish the length of this connecting rod, because you shouldn't have this pointing up and this pointing down. So with the weight of the car on the ground, this should be, pointing down slightly or just almost flat. And then this should also be flat. And then it's adjustable here on the top with that nut. So yeah, we won't be able to adjust it in real time with like a turnbuckle because this end will be fixed. But what we could do is we can, remove one side, just a nut, adjust it, put it back. So it's still an adjustable downlink, but it's not a turnbuckle, which is just more complex than it needs to be. You're not going to adjust this thing all the time. I got the length marked right there. This does not need to be fully welded either because we're just doing a quick mock-up. And then this guy has probably at least 3/4 of an inch of useful travel or adjustment. And then this would get a lock nut on top. But for now, I'm just gonna leave it loose. And then I don't have the correct bushing, for this. I'm probably gonna have to make one. Polyurethane, most likely. So I am just gonna take a piece of rubber hose and some black tape and just wind it up so that I can get the eyelet of this rod centered in the holes in the A-arm and kind of take some of the slop out. See there, it fits in there and the bolt will just pass through. So this is a crude bushing just for mock-up purposes. Ultimately, we're gonna want some flanges on either side to prevent metal-to-metal contact, but we'll get there. So I have it set up to the extreme, which is the loosest. It's the inner hole on the lower A-arm, and it's the hole closest to me on the upper. This bar here is practically vertical, which is what I was after. That's why it has that bend in it as it exits the body. So this bar can be vertical. So I think I've learned what I needed to learn with this mock-up project. Pretty happy with the geometry overall, but when I lift the car up so it goes into full droop, I think I'm seeing this heim joint or rod end. I think I see it binding in the bracket a little bit. So with these things, they have a lot of freedom to articulate. So
you can see like the angle here, it's about, you know, plus 45, minus 45 degrees. But when it's installed in a bracket like this, it's only allowed to go, you know, that's probably 10 degrees, plus minus 10 degrees, which when the suspension is all the way up, it seems like it's starting to twist this or potentially bend the rod. And I think the fix for that is just to make this channel wider and to put some conical washers on either side of that ball so it has a little bit more room to flex. It's probably not going to affect the way it drives because it would take a lot to get the front wheel up off the ground with the way the suspension currently is. I'm going to be redoing the whole strut assembly with a raised spindle and probably coilovers. That'll limit some of the droop. But anyways, I think that this bracket should still be wider. Plenty more testing to do. I'm going to make a metal attachment to the car with a polyurethane bushing on that side too. And then I can connect the other side, the passenger side. And then we can do a little bit more driving testing and see if we, you know, get into any other bind or squeak or any other things. Plus there'll be obviously some tuning with keeping the car flat as it corners. So that's kind of the whole reason for the anti-roll bar. But now that I know that everything fits and the lengths are correct, and I know the bushing thickness, I can make some bushings, make the bearing holder, and also make a new bushing for the bottom where it attaches to the A-arm. And then, like I said, we'll do more testing. I know that a lot of you guys are probably shaking your heads thinking, what are you doing making your own parts? But that's just kind of what I do. And I really wasn't happy with the stuff that's available for an early long hood. You can get the factory parts, but like I said, they're expensive, they're hard to find. This is not a true long hood, so I'd rather those parts go to a real long hood, and I want it to be adjustable. So I've never seen anyone make it double adjustable on the top and the bottom. That would require a little bit of math to decide which hole does what, but the thinking is that if you run out of holes at the top, then you could potentially switch the bottom and then start the tuning process over again. It's kind of like a 10-speed bike. You know, you've got options in the front, you got options in the back. Some of those gears and ratios, mechanical ratios, they can be identical, but that's okay. You just need to kind of understand the leverage on how it pushes up on the spring. I'm happy with the positioning of the downlink. A lot of the ones I see on the market today have angled downlinks. And you know, the angle, I have it within 3 degrees vertical facing the front of the car. When I change the position on the upper arm, right now it's on one extreme, it's minus 8 degrees. I can make it 0 if I choose the right hole, and then it probably will go to about plus 8 degrees if I choose the tightest setting for roll stiffness. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week.